A couple of readings. The first one, Benjamin Franklin. Those who sacrifice liberty for security deserve neither liberty nor security. The second reading is by Roger Baldwin, who said, doing other people good. Just those 4 words. That was the essence to him. Who was Roger Baldwin? Well, he was born in 1884 in Wellesley, Massachusetts. He was a Boston aristocrat, and he was a Unitarian. He served a year in prison for refusing the draft in the Great War. And after prison, he formed the Civil Liberties Bureau 100 years ago, 1917. That became the forerunner of the American Civil Liberties Union. Roger Baldwin said, quote, I always felt from the beginning that you had to defend people you disliked and feared, as well as those you admired. Roger Baldwin. My family and I met Roger Baldwin when he was 95 years old at an ACLU meeting in Washington, D.C. He was ambulating, advocating, and agitating. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, and that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So that was the most famous line in the Declaration of Independence 241 years ago today. No, it actually was the 2nd of July. John Adams wrote Abigail and said, this day, the 2nd of July, 1776, will be the most memorable day in American history. She later said, well, old John, he never could get his dates right. Little chance that he'll ever be president of this country. So, we have a Declaration of Independence, which we all celebrate. It was a Revolutionary War, which Washington, Hamilton, and others won against great odds. But that wasn't really the full solution. The colonies went back to their business, but within 11 years, they gathered together in Philadelphia at the Constitutional Convention that they held, and engaged in what has been described by some as the peaceful overthrow of the American government, as defined by the Articles of Confederation. And who were these overthrowers? Washington, Madison, Hamilton, Franklin. Two years later, Congress passed 12 amendments to the Constitution and sent them out to the states. 10 of those were passed by the states and became known as our first 10 amendments of the Bill of Rights. So, by 1791, nearly 15 years from the Declaration of Independence, we have a Constitution and a Bill of Rights. Everything's been wonderful ever since. In the land of milk and honey, brotherhood, sisterhood, everybody loving each other, no problems. Well, let me tell you, Some of you have heard about the Alien and Sedition Acts. Congress passed in 1798 4 Sedition Acts, allowing the president to imprison and deport non-citizens who were deemed dangerous. Making false statements or critical statements about the federal government was criminalized. Now, the Federalists argued that these acts strengthened national security, and were important that we have those. But they also were unhappy and disgruntled about some people that didn't fit their profile, like those that were French or Irish. And so maybe they would be the ones that needed to be deported. So the Federalists preferred those that were more Anglo-Saxon, shall we say. Now, they were critics. The critics were more the Jeffersonians, or they were called at that time the Democratic Republicans. They criticized these acts, but nevertheless, the sedition laws prevailed. And under the Federalists, there were a number of people who ended up being prosecuted. James Thompson Callender. He was a Virginian. He wrote for the Richmond Examiner. He was indicted in mid-1800 and convicted, fined $200, and sentenced to 9 months in jail. Matthew Lyon was a Democratic Republican a congressman from Vermont. He was indicted in 1800 for an essay he had written for the Vermont Journal, accusing the administration of, quote, ridiculous pomp, foolish adulation, and selfish avarice. Have you ever heard anything so terrible? No. Well, at trial, he was fined $1,000 and sentenced to 4 months in jail. After you get out, you return to Congress. Benjamin Franklin Skokie. This is the grandson of Benjamin Franklin that we all know, the kite flyer. Skokie was editor of the Philadelphia Aurora. He accused George Washington of incompetence and financial irregularities and referred to him as, quote, the blind, bald, crippled, toothless, querulous Adams. No, it was Adams he was referring to. It referred to this Adams and accused him of nepotism and royalist ambition. He was arrested. Did he beat the rap? He died of yellow fever before they could try him. Another fellow, Luther Baldwin, was indicted, convicted. What did Luther Baldwin do? Well, he was hanging out in Newark, New Jersey, when Adams was to make an appearance, and in the distance, a cannon went off. And at this cannon shot, he said, I hope it hit Adams in the arse. Well, under the Sedition Acts, he was prosecuted. Another fellow, 1798, David Brown. He led a group in Devon, Massachusetts, in setting up a liberty pole with the words, no Stamp Act, no Sedition Act, no alien bills, no land tax, downfall to the tyrants of America. Peace and retirement to the president. Long live the vice president. Well, he was arrested in Andover. He was taken to Salem. He was found guilty. He was fined $4,000. $4,000 is a lot of money. Now, can you imagine how much that might have been 225 years ago? He was sentenced to 18 months in prison, the most severe sentence ever carried out under the Sedition Act. Well, Historically, we've had a number of people who voiced their opinions. Socrates, Jesus, Joan of Arc, Jan Hus, Martin Luther, Galileo, Ai Weiwei. What happened to these people? Some of them were executed. Others were tried. Some had to recant. All of them for being free thinkers and speaking their mind. Now, I need to slip back into my childhood for a few minutes, which I'm being told is increasingly likely. When I was a boy of 10 or 12, I had a great childhood. We ran wild with the other boys down in the woods. We swam in the lakes, no adult supervision. We even smoked cigarettes. So, when my father at home made mention of the moral imperative, I thought he was talking about me, because I had a guilty conscience. There were things I was doing as a 12-year-old that were secrets from my parents. It wasn't until much later that I realized, approaching adulthood, that my father had been a philosophy major at Emory University. It wasn't about me at all. He was really interested in philosophy. So what is Immanuel Kant's moral imperative, the categorical imperative? Kant says that there is a moral imperative. We must find it. What did Kant come up with? Well, he searched around and he came up with one, and that is, one must tell the truth invariably, unalterably. Tell the truth. And I appreciate the story we heard by George Washington. So, the children that sat up here, I'm sure, take that to heart. How about the rest of you in this audience here? Did you pass Immanuel Kant's test about honesty? Well, let me give you a test. When your partner asks you, does this Hawaiian shirt make me look fat? What do you say? Are you truthful? Well, probably not. So, moral imperative. First philosophy course I took in college, I ran into the word summum bonum, a Latin word. I hadn't had Latin, but I figured it out. It must be the greatest good, big good. And I looked it up, and it is the supreme good from which all other values are derived. And we got down to the end of the course in philosophy, and I hadn't figured out or hadn't learned what the summum bonum was. We'd studied all these Greek philosophers. So I approached the professor and I said, we only got a few more days of course. What is the summum bonum? And he just smiled, looked at me, and shook his head a little bit like this. And he knew that that would be a lifetime search. I think we have a piece of that in the first thing that's up here in terms of our principles. The inherent dignity and worth of every person. It's in some of our flags hanging around the walls. In terms of Hinduism and Buddhism, the concept of dharma, D-H-A-R-M-A. Duty, it's an obligation toward righteousness. What's all this got to do with anything about speech? Well, I think that that's probably the North Star that's guiding us toward valuing speech. But what about hate speech? Well, I have a story to tell you. I lived in Oklahoma City, and upon driving home from work each day, I had to circle around the state capitol. And about a half mile north of the state capitol, I had to get in the left turn lane at 36th Street to get home. And at that intersection, there was a concrete island separating the north and southbound traffic. And frequently, there would be people handing out pamphlets there. pamphlets, "The end is near." Another one, "2 months free at Gold's Gym." Next day it might be, "Jesus is coming." And so people exercise their free speech, handing out pamphlets. One day, 2 people were handing out pamphlets and got arrested. Read in the newspaper, what good throughout the community, that they were Ku Klux Klanners handing out pamphlets that said unfavorable things about other people, other ethnic groups and races. So at the time, I was president of the ACLU of Oklahoma, and 2 of our volunteer attorneys went down to the jail that very next morning and asked if they could represent these 2 fellows. And the 2 fellows were very eager to get out of there. And so they were represented, and they went before the judge before noon, and the judge dismissed the case. First Amendment, clearly. These guys had the right to hand out their pamphlets like anybody else, whether it's Gold's Gym or Jesus is coming. Now, the rest of the story is, one of the attorneys was Jewish, and the other attorney was black. Okay? Why would they defend Ku Klux Klanners? Why? Well, the irony was sweet. I've had many fantasies, and I often wondered what would it be like to be back at the Clavin that night when the 2 guys showed up, and the rest of the guys said, "Well, we read about you in the newspaper. We're surprised you're back so soon. How'd you get here so quickly? Oh, you had somebody that represented you. Well, tell us, who were the good Samaritans that came and represented you?" Well, what do they say? That would have been nice. Next, I want to tell you about a situation that was not very pleasant, and that is Skokie, Illinois. Skokie, Illinois. We had heart-wrenching debates at the national level of ACLU about whether or not to support the American Nazi Party in their desire to march down the streets of Skokie, Illinois. Many of our members on the national board were Jewish. A disproportionate number of the membership supporting the ACLU throughout the nation were Jewish. And they said this would be irreparably harmful to us, the pain that it would bring to us. Skokie, 70,000 people, 40,000 of whom were Jewish at the time, 1977. 5,000 of whom were Holocaust survivors. That did give every one of us pause. That's a hard one. Well, the National Board voted that they would support the First Amendment right of these people to march. These people wanted to wear uniforms reminiscent of those worn by the members of Hitler's Nazi Party, including swastika armbands, and carry a party banner bearing a large swastika down the street. I think this was one of the truly great victories for free speech, though ACLU lost many longtime supporters over that decision. One of the complaints by the attorneys representing the residents of Skokie was that this would be terribly painful, but also it might lead to uncontrollable violence. It might be serious bloodshed if the Nazis came marching down that street. But the judge decided that would not sway the day. So, if we come up to present day, here are some names. Let's see if you can figure out just silently where you are. What they have in common. Ann Coulter, Betsy DeVos, Charles Murray, Heather McDonald, Richard Spencer. What do they got in common? It's all 2017. These are all college addresses. People giving talks or commencement addresses at colleges and universities just in the last 6 months. So what happened? Ann Coulter, Berkeley said, no, for security and safety reasons, we don't think you should come. And then they finally backed and said, well, we found another date for you. And they gave Ann Coulter a date. That was a day when the students wouldn't be on campus. Clever, huh? That's what an administrator is, yes? Betsy DeVos. We all know who she is. She was booed and jeered and could not complete her address at commencement at Bethune-Cookman. She maintained her composure, and to her credit, she said, we may disagree, but let's choose to hear one another out. Charles Murray. I think he's a guy that is into genetic superiority of certain races. Well, he wasn't injured, but the talk where he was giving, his host, who didn't believe his views, but he was a liberal professor who was hosting Charles Murray, the professor was injured at that presentation. Richard Spencer. Who is Richard Spencer? He's an alt-right, white nationalist. The university officials at Auburn University said, no, you cannot speak here on our campus. And they cited public safety grounds, just like Berkeley had done. U.S. District Judge Keith Watkins, not related to the present speaker, ordered the University of Auburn to accommodate Spencer 1 hour before Spencer was to speak. The hall was full. The front 2 rows filled with guys with short hair, clapping and so forth, and hooping and praising Richard Spencer. Spencer rambles on for an hour or so, and they're hooping and carrying on in support of this white nationalist. And then Mr. Spencer wandered off into another area. He began to talk about the blacks on campus, sexually abusing the white women on campus. Then he got even a little bit further over the lines. He began to excoriate the whites in the audience for rooting for the Auburn football team, describing the black players as not great exemplars of the African race. Suddenly the clapping stopped. It got quiet. People were looking at each other. And some of the ones in the back who had come to hear what this white nationalist was going to say, not of his ilk or his opinion, said, oh, Mr. Spencer, please go on, tell us more. All right? Now, when Harry Haynes heard about this story, he called up his alma mater in Wake Forest and said, guys, you got to get down to Auburn. We have a great opportunity. We may be able to get some prime football players that are ready to transfer. So sometimes, I think what we've learned with free speech is, if he's a fool, let him keep on talking. Let him keep on talking for a while. Now, Harry came back and he was so happy about Wake Forest. He began to talk to Bob about his accomplishment and said, Bob, you know, we got our athletic department on the way down to Auburn. You may want to call Florida State and get some people up there. It's not too late. And Bob said, well, you know, I don't know that FSU needs any subpar players. Now, free speech. How many of you may have made placards, marched in the Women's March in January downtown? A number of you did. Or this March for Science in April, right? Hands up. Lots of you, right? Okay, so everybody's for placards and saying what you believe. What if next Sunday we come and across the street over here, South Park, there are a number of people, and they have placards in the park. They're not loud, but they're putting the placards up and down. One of them says, the Antichrist. And another one says, secular humanists burn in hell. That one was for me. Another one, godless LGBT devil worshippers. All right. Another one, U plus U equal A plus A. Down below, Unitarian Universalists equal atheists agnostics. Well, for many of us, it wouldn't be wrong. But what would we do? And I can imagine that that might very well happen. Would we be supportive of their freedom of speech? Now, I think there are some safety precautions that we would want to take, and we can talk about those at another time. I want to also give some balance here to what I also value very much, and that is that we do what we can to contain hate speech. And I want to give a shout out for one of my heroes, Morris Dees. He's the attorney that has led for years the Southern Poverty Law Center in Alabama. And he has put to win many, many hate groups. He sued the United Klan of America some years ago, who had accumulated tremendous amounts of monies, buildings and so forth in Alabama, from which they spewed out their hatred. He sued them successfully. He wiped them out, drained their till. The poor old Ku Klux Klan was saying, oh, we took all of our money and we don't have our buildings anymore. He's been working with his attorneys for years and years on this. A recent flyer from the Southern Poverty Law Center tells about 917 hate groups that are identified presently in 2017. Black separatists, 193. Ku Klux Klan, 130. Anti-Muslim, 101. White nationalists, 100. Neo-Nazis, 99. Racist skinheads, 78. Anti-LGBT, 52. Neo-Confederate, 43. Christian identity, 21. So there are a lot of hate groups. I read with great interest when I see things in the media about the attorneys pursuing issues for the Southern Poverty Law Center, and almost invariably they still protect the First Amendment, the right for these people to say what they want to say. It's just that when they cross the line, they're going to prosecute them, or they're going to bring action against them. Now, of concern on this day of the Declaration of Independence and the Bill of Rights, the First Amendment, a survey found that 39% of Americans could not name one of the First Amendment freedoms. Not one. 39%. Speech, press, religion. Religion, you can subdivide that into establishment, free expression, assembly, freedom to petition, grievances. None of them should be alarming to us. Let me tell you something that really encouraged me. An article about that Spencer presentation down in Auburn, Alabama. There were some other students that had a very different view. Sarah Pitts, I think is her name. She organized with some other female students there at Auburn. Said, look, we don't believe what this white separatist is going to come and say to these students. Let's find if we can't offer something else. So they organized a musical a festival. And they said, why don't we have free pizza also? So they had a festival going on at the same time that Spencer was talking and had free pizza. And that was very encouraging to me, especially when I read other statistics, like 40% of young people, aged 20 to 34, support government censorship of statements that are offensive to minorities. 40% support censorship. Auburn University has some girls down there, and they said, after all, it's the First Amendment. Spencer should be able to speak, but we'll have our festival and free pizza. And I thought, wow, that's really great. 19 years old and they're doing that.